They don't have to love you, but if they don't know who you are, you're in big trouble. That's this week on Motoring 97.
TSN's Motoring 97 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas, for new longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.
Check out this car lot in Del Mar, California. Now these cars are attention getters. Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 97. Now let's be honest, we all like to receive just a bit of attention, and that includes car manufacturers. For them, it's imperative for their survival, and that also includes Nissan. Now later on, we're going to check out the second generation Altima. Now can this car add some excitement to their product line? We'll try and find out. But first, we're going to meet Diane Allen. She's a chief designer with Nissan's Design Institute here in Southern California. And as we're about to see, she has managed to open doors that were closed for a long time. We first met Diane in 1991. In town for the Toronto Auto Show, Diane made a guest appearance at the Ontario College of Art. Students welcomed the opportunity to display some of their designs and receive some feedback from one of Nissan's chief designers. Although more women are now working in the auto industry, the environment was far different when Diane decided she wanted a career designing cars.
To enter into auto design as a young woman in Detroit was like breaking through the ultimate boys club. It was just so many traditional expectations of what a car designer is and what they should be like, and I am not a traditional, what they call gasoline in my blood. I love form, and I love product, and a car is the ultimate product. So I'm not one who can tell you what model year in 1965 something was made and how long they made it, or what spawned the Mustang. I'm not that type of car designer. I'm a different breed. I lived in Michigan, so we had a basement. It would be hot out, and I would sit in the basement for hours on end just drawing, and my mother would be telling me, go out and play in the sun, and I just couldn't. I just had to draw, and I drew everything, even in class. When I would get bored, I would just draw and draw. I like to work in pen and paper, simple, just gestural, because I think it's the gesture of the car that is the first read of the car. Then the form development, the stance of the car and stuff like that helps enforce the whole imagery, the complete imagery of the vehicle. Do you think we should pull it out?
And widen it.
Widen it? I mean,
unwiden it and widen it.
Should we do that? Because that would help bring it down here.
Yeah.
My son, Brian, who's 14, we live by the beach, and he is an avid surfer, and we spend a lot of time at the beach, walking on the beach, and just relaxing, getting away from our very busy lives, and then going home, and we make dinner together and spend a lot of time together.
One of my friends thought that actually it was kind of weird because it was a female that was designing cars, and some of my teachers think it's kind of weird too. They're a little bit surprised. Looking at it because she's one of the first women designers in the industry is a big deal, because a long time ago it used to be just men and it was quite a sexist job. It's kind of, I don't know, it's nice to have a parent that has like that sturdy of a nice job. Yeah, I'm proud of my mom.
Do you ever reach a saturation point? Do you ever get bored? Do you ever think, my goodness, I can't come up with anything new? Or
Oh, sure. And on your way home from a day's work where you don't have one idea on the board that's worth looking at, you feel your career's over, you're dried up, you have no more ideas, you might as well start looking in the yellow pages for places to work. But I'm a firm believer in the incubation process, that if you get enough kind of stimulus about something, you don't have an idea, you just almost walk away from it and you do something else. You read, or you look at other facets of your life and focus there. When you come back to the design work, there seems to be this pot that brings the ideas back, you know, that they do get replenished. But I think it's really important as designers that we do look for ways to get away from the work so we can replenish.
I'd say in most cases we're not aware of a gender issue, and that's really nice, I think, for both of us. One, I think it shows her great confidence with herself, and she's, I think, beyond the issues of gender, to the point to where I think we, being primarily a male studio, we have one more female designer in our studio, but I think it's really kind of disappeared as an issue, and it'd be nice if that was a more pervasive attitude in you know, the rest of the world.
I think I was tagged a token woman, and it really took a lot of drive and optimism, I think, on my part, and a few inspirational, actually, individuals along my career path that have inspired me, despite, you know, all the roadblocks for women in auto design, to just go for it if you love it. If follow your gut, follow your heart, and that's why I'm here. Captures a light and adds joy.
As well as being all aluminum and featuring 24 valves and multi-point fuel injection, the engine uses Honda's VTEC system. Prognosticators tell us that the coupe market is supposedly dead or dying primarily because of the popularity of sport utility vehicles. Well, believe it or not, in the past year there have been fewer than 10 new SUVs brought to market, and yet there have been almost 20 new coupes. Well, this week on Test Drive we take a look at one of them, namely the Acura CL. Without question, the highlight of the CL is the new 3-litre motor. This is down to some technology that can be traced back to Honda's Formula 1 days. Not only is it powerful to the tune of 200 horsepower and 195 pounds-feet of torque, the engine uses Honda's VTEC system. Now, VTEC stands for Variable Valve Timing and Lift Electronic Control. At low RPM, each of the intake valves are opened by rocker arms that follow low-lift, short-duration cam lobes. At 3,500 RPM, these two rockers are tied to a third, which follows a high-lift, long-duration cam profile. The result is more than 150 pounds-feet of torque, anywhere from 1,000 RPM to the 6,300 RPM red line. On road, this equates to near instantaneous throttle response and a 0 to 100k time of just 7.5 seconds. The only tranny available is a 4-speed auto that is packed to the gunnels with electronics. As smart as it's touted to be, the box still seems to suffer from periodic brain fade. As you approach a slow right-hand turn, the transmission is unable to decide whether it should be in first or second gear. Now, this causes a momentary pause while it makes up its mind. Aside from this annoying foible, the box behaves well, especially under wide-open throttle acceleration, where the well-spaced ratios allow you to fully enjoy the engine. Suspension has always been one of Acura's strong points, and the CL is no exception, featuring a fully independent double wishbone design at all 4 corners. A lot of people ask me, what is the advantage of double wishbone suspension over McPherson strut? Well, quite simply, McPherson strut, because of the design, as the wheel rises and falls, it scribes an arc. Double wishbone suspension, on the other hand, the wheel rises and falls perpendicular to the road, eliminating a lot of the camber and toe change. That's why it's superior. It also gets stabilizer bars both back and front and nitrogen gas-charged shocks that are fitted with Acura's patented NWS, or new wide-setting progressive valves. These multi-layer valves allow the system to offer both responsive handling and superior ride comfort, both of which the CL does very well. You know, surprisingly, the limiting factor on this CL is not the suspension nor the tyres, but the power steering. On the transitions between left and right, periodically I can beat the steering. Now, reality says that you're not liable to encounter this when you're out on the road, but in the event of a sharp left-right emergency type manoeuvre, you could run into it, so be warned. Inside, the CL is attractively attired. There's copious amounts of leather and just enough wood to add warmth. The analog instrumentation is neat and legible, and the radio readily accessible. Conversely though, the climate controls are fiddly because they're shoehorned into the tiniest piece of dash. A couple of minor pet peeves with the interior of the CL. First of all, every time you grab the belt, it invariably gets caught on this little lever. The second thing, this is the control for the sunroof. It shouldn't be on the dash, it should be up here on the header where most are. Elsewhere, the cruise functions are mounted on the steering wheel. There's a well-placed dead pedal and an anti-theft system. To ease entry to the rear, the driver's seat powers forward when it's tilted. Once back there, the room is generous, both in terms of head and legroom. Well, that's it for this edition of Test Drive. You know, this CL is sure to please. It's got an engine that's as sweet as a nut, it handles like there's no tomorrow, and it's got a usable back seat. In short, this car could just bloom into their bestseller. It's time for another update on our long-term Elantra. Now, believe it or not, we've had nothing but luck with the car aside from the transmission problem. Now, as far as the transmission's concerned, Hyundai are going to take the car back, find out what's wrong and report back to us, and at which point we'll report back to you. Now, as I said, we've had nothing but luck. So far, we've put about 7,000 K on the clock, and you know what? We've been getting unbelievable gas mileage. Now, I'm not going to tell you what it is right now because I want to save that bit of good news for the final update. We've also taken a couple of long trips with the kids, and you know what? The trunk will hold all of the luggage and the kids are happy in the back, which makes my life a lot easier. Now, before I go, I just want to tell you what happened to me on the way to work the other morning. A wheel nut came off the back end of a truck. What a surprise. Anyway, it hit the windshield and I thought the world was coming to an end. Thank goodness Hyundai used a decent sheet of glass for the windshield. You know what? Truckers have earned and deserved the reputation they have.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns brake dust. As the friction material wears on any brake system, dust is produced. Now, this 97 Transport has drum brakes on the rear and disc on the front. As far as I'm concerned, that's the desirable setup for anything with the exception of sports cars. And you can see at the back wheel here, the wheel's quite clean. There is no brake dust evident here. The brake dust, as a matter of fact, is all contained inside the brake drum. However, when we move up to the front of the vehicle, you can see the vehicle's just been through a car wash and it's clean, but the front wheels are really fouled with brake dust. Now, that's a normal and unavoidable part of disc brake systems, and because this wheel is so open, it deposits itself around the perimeter of the wheel with centrifugal force. Now, I suspect that there was some tire prep stuff sprayed on here that made it stick a little bit better, but in any case, you can get the idea. This is a normal and unavoidable condition. Now, if you want to minimize it, the new Midas carbon metallic brake pads, for example, because they wear less, produce less dust. Less dust, less fouling of the wheel. And that fouling of the wheel, in the case of these aluminum wheels, in many cases can cause the wheel to pit and corrode. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Well, there it is, the all-new second-generation Altima. And needless to say, Nissan is hoping it does big things in the showroom. But I'd also hazard a guess that Nissan is hoping that even though it's just a four-door sedan, that it might win them back some of that spotlight.
It may have been the biggest non-event at this year's Detroit Auto Show. Nissan took a page from the Chrysler book and staged a gala event for the world media. It was an interpretation of the company's successful animated television commercial that featured the 300ZX, a car that has been discontinued. It was almost anticlimactic then when the new car was unveiled. It was not much more than a model of Nissan's second-generation Altima. There was a feeling that Nissan just wanted some attention. Nissan's chief designer, Jerry Hirschberg, was not about to disagree.
Yes, there's pressure, and it is difficult to hold center stage. The tendency that we have to withhold ourselves, however, is not to shout too loud. To us, a great design speaks with quiet confidence. And so, on the one hand, it wants to be noticed. On the other hand, it doesn't want to scream for attention. And more, I think we just do not want to speak down to the audience. People are informed, people are spending hard-earned cash, and we need to develop intelligent product for them.
So before you drive the car, let me just give you a little bit of background on it so you'll get an idea in your mind of what we were trying to accomplish with the new Altima.
We now switch the scene to Del Mar, California. Nissan, buoyed by the fact that the company is making money for the first time in years, was hoping to get the Canadian media excited about the new Altima. But it won't be easy.
Yeah, I think they do need something to grab the public's attention, but again, I'm not sure how they do that, and quite honestly, I don't think they do either, because they just don't. They haven't presented any product that will do that. The new Altima is a terrific little car, but it's a family sedan. It's aimed at 50-year-old baby boomers, and it's aimed at maybe young up-and-comers, or the early baby boomers, as they call them, 30-odd years old. But it's not a car that's going to grab the market and give it a shake by any means.
It's a four-door sedan. Let's face it. It's just another four-door sedan. There are so many out there, but we think that the styling that it has is very Nissanish. It's got some little Maximism to it. It will attract attention, but I think the population will be pleasantly surprised when they see the vehicle. And of course, we'll have an advertising campaign to attract them to our showrooms.
I go back some decades at this point, and Nissan was one of the companies that I kind of grew up in this business with, and always had a lot of respect for, and they were, on top of their game for a lot of years. Then they seem to have fallen by the wayside somewhere along the line, and I don't really know why. They've had a good series of products, so right the way through, and they still do. But somehow or other, maybe perhaps on the marketing side, they seem to have lost their way a little bit.
Well, I think you have to have a car which has a unique selling point. I mean, this is an old kind of marketing item, but I mean, it's true. You've got to tell people there's something unique about your car. Why would they want to buy it? In our case, we call it affordable luxury. I mean, this is what this vehicle is all about. High value, lots of luxury features, a vehicle that's very comfortable to drive, and just suits this kind of modern day, quote, family need.
Some of the boys, and I should mention girls also, were over here just a moment ago asking me if I joined them in a game of volleyball. Of course, I told them I'm busy working, but they did comment on the new Altima, and one said it looks kind of big. And you know what? That's exactly what Nissan is hoping to hear more of. All right, now let's head to the garage and join Bill Gardiner. And you know something, Bill? Too bad you're not here, because you and I would make a great duet out here on the beach.
Well, Brad, I'll tell you, I'll pass on the offer of the volleyball. I'm more into basketball myself, as you can see. With the Raptors and the Grizzlies, we're really into this basketball stuff these days. But I'll tell you, I see it's nice and hot out where you are. And during this past week, things got a little bit too hot for one of my customers. That's what I want to talk about. We don't like to use four-letter words here on motoring, but there's one that gets everybody's attention, I'm sure, and that's fire. This is what happened to my customer's 91 Grand Marquis this week. This car is in impeccable condition, maintained flawlessly. It's always spick and span, but they were unfortunate enough to have a wiring fire in this car this past week. While they were driving along, they had a little bit of smoke coming up from under the hood, opened the hood to investigate, and found that there was a very small fire under the hood right at the alternator. Now, what had happened was the alternator harness, there was a bad wiring connection where the wiring harness plugs into the alternator, and it got so hot that it actually caught the plastic and the insulation in that area on fire. Now, they were fortunate enough to have somebody come by quickly with a fire extinguisher and get it out. Now, I've taken the bolts out of this alternator and already cut the wiring away, and you can see what happened. You can see the alternator is all blackened in this area, and the output plug right here is all completely melted from that fire, and the wiring's all fried and everything. But what happened here, because of that high resistance connection, there was a lot of heat generated here. I'm sure you've all unplugged a kettle from the wall and felt that heat in the end of the plug. That's what happens when you have a poor connection, and on an automobile it's the same kind of thing. It caught this thing on fire. Now what we're going to have to do is put a rebuilt alternator on it, and we're going to have to snip back about 8 or 10 inches of the wiring harness and get ourselves a new piece of wiring harness. There it is right there. Okay, and there's our rebuilt alternator. And we're going to have to install this properly on the car and make a good connection here. Now, a couple of things can be learned from this lesson. First of all, somebody really did a good thing by getting there quickly with a fire extinguisher. It's almost impossible to have a fire and have as little damage as this car had. Believe me, this is very, very minor damage for a car that caught on fire, and only because somebody got there quickly with an extinguisher. Now, the second thing to be learned from this is the fact that when they were finished with this car, when they got the fire out, they walked away from the car, but they left the battery cable hooked up, and those wires were still live. Now, fortunately, they'd burned themselves free of any connection, but you know, the possibility was there for that thing to get going again if somebody jarred it. So what they should have done was remove the battery cable before they went away from it. The other thing you want to remember is it's a heck of a good idea to carry one of these in your vehicle, a dry chemical fire extinguisher. In the case of this Grand Marquis, believe me, it did save the vehicle. Now, one thing that really is a pet peeve of mine is the fact that Ford even uses a connection like this. They use this plug-in connection for the output terminal of the alternator, and there's anywhere from 75 to 100 amps of current flowing through there, depending on how hard this alternator is charging. If you've got a dead battery, let's say you've boosted a vehicle with a dead battery, it's conceivable that this thing could be putting out anywhere from 75 to 100 amps depending on the car. That's a lot of current, and these connections are going to get hot if they're at all shaky. Now, years ago, Ford used to use a stud on the back of the alternator, something like this. This is a General Motors alternator, and General Motors still does this today. They have a stud on the output terminal, an eyelet goes over there, and then this nut goes on, you tighten it down with a wrench. It's a very positive connection. That's the way Ford used to do it, the way GM still does it, and why Ford went away from that, I don't know. Obviously, it's for ease of assembly, because on the assembly line, all they have to do is push this connection in. It's easy, but I think it's a bit of a compromise. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 97.
What do I think of the new Corvette? Here's a clue. That's next on Kenzie's Corner.
A portion of Motoring 97 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
This is the 1997 Corvette. Pretty hot car, and you won't see many of them in blue. In fact, you won't see many at all. There's only 202 cars in the entire country for 1997. I've got mine now, and Graham will be getting his for a full road test on a later show. Meanwhile, what do I think of it? Well, it's here. There's a lot of pressure on GM to cancel this car, but the Corvette guys convinced them to give another shot. They said they could compete with the Germans and the Japanese. Meanwhile, 345 horsepower, $48,000. You do the math. There's nothing wrong with that from my perspective. Now, the German techno snobs will say the Boxster, they'll say the SLK, they'll say the Z3. I'll just say this car outhandles them, outruns them. It'll eat their lunch, eat their breakfast, eat their dessert, and drink their coffee too. So let them have all the cars they want, but for me, I'll take this one.
Nissan tells us that they were selling about 6,000 of the original Altima annually. They're hoping that this new generation vehicle will bump that up to about 10,000. Can they succeed? Well, of course, you will be the judge. And in just a few weeks, Graham will pass his judgment on Test Drive. That's it for now. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
We had an experience where I had found the probe that I wanted, and it was not in red. He said that you didn't want it in red because the insurance people would charge us more for red cars. We knew it was that time we needed to get out of the dealership and get on the computer.
TSN's Motoring 97 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas for new, longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.